Week 7 has concluded, and we are 1 week past the trade deadline, which was an interesting and fun show last week. And now we're starting to see a little bit of how things are settling out after that. We're going to talk a lot about that today. We're going to talk about all the moves that were made by some of the key teams that we had in our poll last week. We'll talk about that poll and who the big winners were according to the LG community. And we'll start previewing who we think is going to be in and out and who the playoff contenders are, which will be determined in just a couple of quick weeks, 2 weeks from now pretty much, as we have 2 weeks left in the season in the AHL. Hi everyone, T-Sibs with you, and joined today by Vibes Digital and Dead Soul. And gentlemen, it was certainly an interesting week watching how things progressed, including right after the trade deadline. And let's just talk about that for a minute. The trade deadline show that we did last week, I think we all were pretty drained after that show. But it was a lot of fun to do, as it has been in the past. It was a bit quiet. We did a lot of speculation, and all of a sudden, hell broke loose, and everyone was talking about the Columbus and Cleveland stuff. But I remember listening towards the end of the show, Vibes, you sounded like you were about to fall asleep. You were so drained.
I'm still tired. From the show.
But
I still haven't recovered.
But that was a fun week. That was a fun day, though. Just waiting to see what would happen. The anticipation was suspenseful.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun putting the show together. I feel like that was probably one of the most work-intensive shows that we put together, and then the day itself was really good too. There were a lot of good hockey moves, like I mentioned last week. Probably the best that I think I've seen. Not the most, not in terms of volume, but some of the best moves, and you can tell that some GMs are really starting to get it. So it's nice to see.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I'm glad that it actually started to pick up near the end, and for myself, I was able to get something done. I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. I think there's a few other people that had that same feeling, and it was good overall. I think everybody got what they wanted, or at least what they needed, for the most part. Maybe some people might have been left out, but ultimately, some of these teams have improved. Others, maybe not.
That's a part of the whole trade deadline that we really didn't cover last week, and that is, if you're a team, and Dead Soul, you can speak to this for sure. If you're a team that feels like you want to make a move or two, but you are really struggling to find a good deal, trying to not find the person that you want, but trying to agree upon what the compensation should be. I know, talking to Princess Zeus last week, there were, quite frankly, there were a lot of bad deals being bandied about, and that's got to be incredibly frustrating as a GM. You feel like you're making a fair offer, and another team basically wants, I don't know, one of your frontline forwards for a second line defenseman because I think they have you over a barrel. I mean, I think that's got to be incredibly frustrating when you're getting down to the trade deadline. You feel like you have one piece left and you just can't get that person.
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes, though. I mean, sometimes you get lucky and you'll find people that you can deal with that need the same kind of returns and know what a fair return would be for what the market is, what's out there. And other times it's just everybody's going after that same kind of thing, and it's just a small market, and people are just wanting to have the most for the least, and you just got to kind of deal with that, and it takes a bit of talking, and sometimes you make something happen, and other times you just have to move along because you're just not going to see eye to eye. But yeah, ultimately a lot of people try to pull fast ones here and there and until near the end, and then they have to make a trade where it needs to be done, and maybe they gave away too much, maybe they gave away too little. It's always interesting to see how that kind of turns out.
It's pretty restrictive, Vibes, right? I mean, once the trade deadline is done, there's not much you can do as a GM at that point. There's There may be a couple of players, one or two, possibly down in your training camp that you can call up permanently, but for the most part, if you have pretty much all prospects down there, you're screwed. That's got to make that trade deadline. I got to imagine someone like you, Vibes. You've got one player. You're one player away. You know who you want. You can't get that GM quite over to your side of thinking to make that trade. How do you balance keeping your cool and trying again to make it happen and wanting to jump through the Skype call and choke the other GM for being stupid?
Well, you just gotta, you have to keep a strong vision of what you want and what you're willing to give up. And me personally, I never give anybody a bad deal. So if I offer you a deal, it's the right deal for you. That's the way I see things.
I can attest to that. I can attest to that. You made a really good deal with me in season 1. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta make sure you take care of the other guy too. But obviously, you put yourself first. Sometimes, around the deadline, there is some added pressure, and people don't want to get trapped in the bubble with nowhere to go. After the trade deadline, that essentially is it. I mean, with the exception of maybe if your NHL team is not doing so hot and they send a few guys down, or maybe a few guys fall to you in some weird waiver twist or whatever the case may be. But for the most part, that's it, and that's why we call it the trade deadline, because that's your last chance to improve your team, on your own accord anyway. So,
and oftentimes you're going to see a lot of people waived that they were trying to move anyways.
Yeah.
So that's always kind of interesting to see those guys get waived that they were really trying to push for your better players. And other times, you could have made a really good deal that would have been helpful for both teams, yet they ended up with somebody maybe not as good that you were offering. So that's kind of funny to watch that as well, because it always happens every time.
Yeah. It's your last chance to do something where you're driving. After the trade deadline, you ain't driving no more.
That is kind of how it feels, though, right? I mean, other than setting lineups, there's, you're on autopilot at that point.
Yes, sir.
Well, let's talk about the, what happened at the deadline last week. And I want to start off just by talking about the poll that we had out there, which was with all the moves made from Thursday night at 5 p.m. until 5 p.m. on Sunday, who won the trade deadline. And we basically, it was Cleveland with 35.3% of the vote, Bridgeport 20.6%, Binghamton 14.7%, and then Albany and Iowa with about 9%, Bakersfield 6%, San Antonio, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton with 3% each. And Iowa we threw in there because they basically stood pat and didn't do much. And so, interesting, obviously people think Cleveland won, but is that, because of all they did, I guess it's a win because you're able to bring down that kind of talent, and a solid team just made themselves even more stacked, as we were talking earlier, a stacked team becoming more stacked. But, let's talk more about what's happened with these teams after the trade deadline, and I know a couple of them that were middle to bottom in the voting here, Binghamton and Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Binghamton number 3 in the voting results of our poll. Vibes, I know you took a look at both of those teams, and what did you find as far as what Binghamton and Wilkes-Barre did and how their players involved in those moves did?
Well, I mean, I felt like Wilkes-Barre had a pretty good week. They went 6-3. I don't know how much of that can be attributed to the players that they picked up, though. It seems like the guys who have been there that are getting it done. Hockeytown probably had the best week. He went 2-1 in his game, so he put up 8 points in 3 games. You have Diecast. He only went 1-2. He put up 6 points. And Smoothie went 1-2. One of those losses came in OT. He put up 7 points. So the 3 big guys that they picked up, with the exception of maybe Hockeytown, not having the greatest week in the world, but overall the team is doing well. So 6-3, that's is not an amazing week, but it's a pretty good week. So I guess you could say one way or the other, whether it's those teams, those players adding depth to the rest of the roster, or what have you. I guess you could say it's working out. Binghamton went 5-4, so just barely over 500. Granny Smith was 2-1 with a 0 rating, which isn't bad for a defenseman. West 20 VT went 2-1 with a 7 points. He put up 7 points in his 3 games, so that's not bad. And Miguel Zetterberg was 2-1 with 6 points. So, the trades are, I guess you could say they're working out.
I took a look at the two top teams that were in our voting for the who did the best, and Cleveland this past week going 8-0-1. Again, starting the week off with a 13-6 win over Chicago, sending a statement right there. And then it took until Thursday night, which was a Thursday night hockey game, where Texas in overtime beating Cleveland 4-3 in that game. Texas playing great defense the whole game. Forwards coming back and playing well, and that might very well be a good formula for beating the Cleveland Monsters. But the guys who were sent down, who are the ones who are the really big part of the discussion about what happened with Cleveland. Brenty Mulligan, Pupin, and Vito Corleone, and JT 412, who was really Jay Tryhard. Jay Tryhard went 3-0 for the week. Pupin 3-0, Vito 3-0, and Brenty 3-0. So obviously these guys had a big impact on their team this week, and it was some of the folks who have already been on the team who had a rougher part, a little bit rougher. I say rougher, losing in overtime, the only loss. Who really had some difficulty later in the week, but for the most part, Cleveland. Again, pretty much what we figured. They're still a very good team, now even better because of these guys who came down, and they are going to be a hard team. That game that they lost to Texas was the lineup with Big Freeze in there, and Deer Hunter and Syrup as their front line, Siege and Shirk as their defensemen. So, and they played incredibly well. Texas had the formula that day and got past them. So Cleveland, the rich get richer. I think it'll be an interesting rest of the next couple of weeks to see how they shape up for the rest of the run. And at this point, they're just trying to solidify things to be ready for the playoffs at this point. For Bridgeport, the Tigers picked up the traded Devils Pride away for Dan Johnson. They made that trade with the Monsters to send V. Coatster over to Cleveland for Slyman, Derms, Gauchi. Derms went up to the Islanders. Gauchi was 1-1-1 on the week for Bridgeport, and so and I'm trying to look at some of the other players. Yeah, Advanced Human was part of a trade with the Griffins. The Tigers had sent over Bobby Hill, an elite sniper, and the Griffins sent Advanced Human over to Bridgeport. Human going 0-3 on the right wing. So they struggled a little bit more this week with their trades. And Human is a solid player. Maybe it's a matter of just getting, again, that kind of socialization with the rest of your line mates and getting used to what they do. And it may take a week or two. I'm not shocked whenever there are some downsides after a trade with a team. Bridgeport this week, 4-5-1, I believe they were. 2 overtime wins and an overtime loss, losing to Binghamton 2-1 to start the week, beating Utica 4-3 in overtime, losing in the next game Wednesday night to Syracuse 5-4 in overtime. So most of these games, a couple of games that were a bit blowouts, but for the most part they stayed close in all their games. The only one that was a bit of an alarming game was a 10:30 Sunday night game, a 7-2 loss to the Phantoms, and so that's probably something that that's a game that would scream out to me, hey, what happened there, and let's see if we can fix it if I'm Bridgeport's management. But again, they made a few moves, looking to make a run, and I think they just need another week or two to see if these guys gel with their team and how they do in the end. Couple of games that a couple of teams that Dead Soul was looking into, and I don't know if you're ready to talk about the teams that you had. I think Albany was one of them, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Albany actually went 3-6 this week, so it's kind of a little bit of a rough week for them. The notable games, though, that they had, which were two very close games. One of them was against the Crunch, which came at an OT loss, a 5-4 game, and the Comets, which was another 5-4 game. So those were actually some close games against some very tough teams. They had their newer acquisitions were right D TK or 1994, who went 1-1-1 on the week. Their lefty Ratty JR went 1-1-1 as well with a -2. And one of their more interesting acquisitions, which was their center for the amazing Pepe, he also went 1-1-1 and with a -1. Although he did put up 6 points, 3 goals, 3 assists. And I guess another notable game that they had was they beat the Marlies 4-1, and they won against the Ice Caps 7-4. So I mean, they've had a few games where they put up some points and they can obviously be effective and dangerous, but overall not quite the week that they probably were hoping to have. And then the Wild actually, not surprisingly, went 7-2, with one of their losses coming from the Cleveland Monsters 7-3. Deer Hunter had a pretty big point in that game, or point game. He had 5 goals, 1 assist. So I mean, he was certainly good in that game for the Monsters. And then the Wolves, they lost to the Wolves as well, 5-2. So that's an interesting loss. I mean, the Wolves had started off very hot and very good, and now they've kind of, been trying to get back to their more consistent winning ways like they had been in the first part of the season. But it looks like, with what the Wild did, which was nothing at the trade deadline, basically, I guess the old saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it, goes pretty well with them. So, they're still the team to beat along with the Monsters, and they're obviously battling for that first spot every week. And it's going to continue to be interesting to see which team is actually going to come out on top.
So that's a basic scoop. I think I think one of the things, and you guys can talk more to this as a GM with your experience of making trades and watching guys come on your team. I think there is always a bit of an adjustment, unless you're getting somebody who winds up on a line with guys that they've already played with a good deal and know their style of play. I think there's always a transition where they have to get used to their new line mates and figure out how they're going to work it. And to me, that's where practice probably comes in a good deal. Has that been your experience, Vibe, in the past? When you make trades and you bring guys in, is there always a bit of an adjustment time, or have you been lucky with that?
Usually, there could be a bit of an adjustment. Sometimes the adjustment never happens, and then sometimes it's love at first sight. There could have been a previous relationship, maybe some sort of a domestic partnership between the two, and things just seem to work out. They know how each other plays, and that could have been a part of the catalyst as to why you went and got him in the first place. But it's hit or miss. But usually, I would say, if you're going out and getting a guy that there's no previous history between the players, there usually is an adjustment period. Yeah.
Almost always, yeah. It takes it. It can also go the other way, right? Where you can pick somebody up where you didn't realize maybe has some bad blood with somebody on your team, and sometimes it can really be bad, and that might mess you around for trying to get scheduling done, because maybe those players are only available the same games, and they just they hate each other, don't want to play with each other, so that can be an issue. Sometimes it's happened, but it does take time for people to start to gel, and it really does come down to practice. Unless that player is one of those guys that just is one of those people that can actually make people around him better, no matter who he plays with, because he's just that good. And those are fewer and farther between, though. So.
Oh yeah. So to be noted with Bridgeport, just to go back to them for a second, they did make a lot of moves leading up to the deadline the week before. They were shuffling players around between Bridgeport and the Islanders. Before we got to the deadline, a few days before that, they picked up Headhunter for Fetcher. They picked up Scarecrow, a defenseman. A goaltender, good goaltender for Tuckett Teal. And so they did make a lot of moves. In the end, again, Scarecrow going 2-2 as well in this past week. Headhunter was 2-1. Some lukewarm results so far for Bridgeport. A lot of moves, and again, even if you're getting good quality players, I kind of feel like there's a point where you can make too many moves, and you've really disrupted the any kind of chemistry with your team. I kind of feel like we did that with Tucson last season. We made a few moves, the team got a little better, and then just kept on making moves, and it totally screwed, I think, with the chemistry of the team. And now that the trade deadline's over, you can't really mess up that much. But I prescribe to the idea that there can be too much movement on a team. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, next thing you know, you're traveling down the rabbit hole, and you don't know where it ends. You need to be tactical with your moves. You need to have an idea. Don't just go out there and move just for the sake of moving, because then you're not doing your team, yourself, or anybody really a justice. So definitely don't move just for the sake of it.
I almost feel like it's an addiction, isn't it? That's all with some guys.
Well, yeah, without a doubt. I think there's some people that just love to make those moves and think that it's necessary, or maybe just, they're just panicking. But you got to be patient, and it takes time. Everything, you just got to be a little bit more, you got to believe in your team, the guys that you have. And if you don't, and that's kind of starting to show, and people can kind of tell that, maybe my GM and my other players don't really believe in me, then, that's going to get in their head as well and think, maybe they're not going to play as well. And not purposely, it's just, it does affect them negatively like that. And you have to be able to just kind of, be a good leader and make sure that you try and get these guys to get together, have their practices. And that's hard sometimes to do, I know. But, there's always going to be situations where, things just don't work out, and you got to make moves. And you got to be careful as to when you do that.
Watch out for those GMs scraping the GM chat at 3-4 in the morning. You got any trades, man?
That I imagine is probably a constant issue in this league. And you guys, as a GM,
hours.
I'm sure you get them all hours, don't you? Well, speaking of GMs, and probably the GM who's gotten his name spoken in vain on numerous occasions this past week is 4H Pestilence. He's the owner of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and certainly a man deeply involved in what went on with the Cleveland Monsters last week at the trade deadline. And he joins us now to talk about everything that went on last week. Pest, how you doing today?
Doing good. How are you guys doing?
Look what the wind blew in. What dumpster they find you behind?
You still rocking the fedora?
Hey, listen, there's stuff in the shout box every day, and certainly 99% of it can be ignored. But a lot of talk after last week's trade deadline, and I'm sure you saw a lot of it too. You and I spoke a couple of times this past week about it, and I wanted you to come on and talk a little bit about it. One of the things you mentioned to me is that, your goal is to win a cup for both teams every season. And when the reality is that that's not going to happen, there are decisions that you have to make as an owner, and you have to make with your AHL team. So talk about the mindset of what you and Freeze and everyone else in management in your organization, what you guys were thinking, and what was the process leading to the trades that you made and the moves of a few players down to Cleveland.
So basically, Columbus has been in a holding pattern for the better part of a month now. We start and end every week 9 or 10 points out of a playoff spot. So obviously, we weren't making the playoffs this year, and if we went on a miracle run and got in as the last wild card team, it probably would have been a first-round exit anyway. So I had to do what was best for my organization and move pieces that I didn't see being back next year for assets for next season. So I traded Galchi, Herms, and Slime, who are first liners on pretty much every other team in the league, but with third liners on Cleveland, for a top 15 pick next season, a third round pick, plus Codester, who I see being a big part of the picture next season as well for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I can ECU, Poopin, Brentley, Tryhard, and Vito the rest of their games, while giving Cleveland the ability to send out a first line every game of the week, plus every game in the playoffs. So I had to do what was best for my entire organization. I know some people don't agree with it, but it is what it is.
And so the again, a lot of the backlash this week, as you saw. I mean, what do you tell your own team when they see a lot of this being said? What did you talk about as far as the team's concerned, and what do you tell them to think about all this?
Well, basically, they handle themselves in the shout box, and they come to the same thing. Haters gonna hate. They were the number one team before I sent those guys down, and they're the number one team after.
Well, what do we have over here?
A cup of haters.
Well, I guess it's, look, you're always going to have that. I think no matter what happens, you're always going to have to deal with something along these lines when you make a move like this. And I don't know what else anyone really would expect, a GM to do or an owner to do. You do have to think about the next season. If you're planning on being there, and obviously, Pest, you plan on being back at Columbus, you're thinking about the future. And I think that's what people probably have to take away from this. But for whatever reason, I think, I think maybe a lot of folks also talked a little bit about, well, how about the players that got them there and now they're being traded away? You and your organization went about trying to find good situations for them, didn't you?
Yeah, we wanted to keep them together, which I had trade negotiations for each one of them separately, but we knew that they were all friends in real life, so we wanted to keep them together, and we didn't want to send them to a shit team where they had no chance of making the playoffs. So basically, the stars aligned perfectly for everybody when me and Caesar were able to work out a deal.
Did you find that kind of easy to make a deal for these guys, or did you take a little bit of time to really kind of put the feelers out and see who's interested, what you might get in return, or was it a pretty simple situation for you?
Me and Caesar had trade discussions a couple weeks before the deadline for Herms, and I told him, no, not right now. And then basically on that Sunday, I put the feelers out in the owner's chat of who would be interested in these three guys. And I had a couple other teams talk to me about them, but none where I could have moved all three together.
How did you find the trading deadline for you guys? Like, what was that like? Were people easy to kind of trade with or talk to? Were they giving some kind of fair deals, or were people trying to fleece you as well?
Oh, in the NHL, it's all about trying to trade. Offers, some of the offers from some of the owners are just downright stupid.
So it really is not any different than it is in the AHL. Then it's just a lot of the same.
No, it's probably even worse than the AHL.
Yeah.
They offer you a package of Skittles for your firstborn.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit earlier. It was, it's. I've mentioned it's a lot like fantasy football as well, where owners want to, they always want to try at least their first attempt to try and make a trade is to get your best player for the garbage on the bench, and I found that LG is probably no different. You've got probably GMs who are looking to find, even your top player on your second line for your third line defenseman. And I understand trying to start out low, but it seems like you GMs, definitely have a hard time trying to get other guys to come up and be reasonable with moves.
Yeah. I'm not going to name any names, but there's an owner out there who all season long has sent me the stupidest offers. And when I'm like, no, he's like, oh, you're a fucking idiot. You belong in the AHL. Go back to where you came from. You stupid idiot.
Nice.
You
And I'm like,
You're
I'm
stupid
like, how
for not being
about
stupid.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, how about you don't make me a shitball offer and maybe we could get something done here.
I wonder if you made his list.
Might have.
Well, I'm sure. One thing I think you're wrong about. I'm sure there's more than one owner and GM out there like that. I'm sure there are plenty.
Oh yeah.
Oh, there are, but I'm not going to get into that.
Well, listen. I wanted you to at least come on and at least put your side of the story out there. One thing about the shout box is it's a shout box. It's a public forum, and we let any moron be able to talk on there, but I want to be able to have intelligent morons talk on this show, which is why we're doing it. But seriously, I want guys like you who have made the effort to own a team, to GM for a team, who make effort in LG and make moves and get criticized. I want you guys to be able to come on and talk about it. And I thank you for coming on today and talking with us for a little bit about Columbus and about Cleveland. Listen, best of luck to you the rest of the season and next season, too.
Thank you. Have a good one, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
4-H Pestilence, the Columbus Blue Jackets owner, joining us today to talk about everything that went on last week. And, again, we have a poll up right now that I will present to you folks. It is about what has happened with the moves this past week. And let me just make sure that you all can see it. The poll is, what statements best describe your opinion on the issue of Cleveland's roster moves? And this will close next week, but you can make multiple choices, up to 3 on this one, because you may not just have one opinion, but we've got a few options here. Pest did what he needed for his organization. Cleveland was already very successful. Why change anything? The players that got them there should have stayed on Cleveland, which is a little bit what we were talking about. Cleveland has stacked an already stacked team, which was I think I took that from you, Dead Soul. I think you actually said that to me earlier today. And not crazy about all the trades, but at least they moved their players to good teams. LG should consider rule changes to prevent send-downs like this, which I think we heard a lot in the shout box. And then finally, Vibe's contribution. That's life. Get over it and move on. And I'm assuming, Vibes, that's pretty much how you feel about this issue.
Yeah, and you know what? I will speak, and I didn't want to mention it while he was here because I don't want I don't want it to come off like I'm trying to fluff Pest or anything like that. But listen, the moves were good. The guy made good moves, okay? And everyone's upset because it's like, the rest of the league was sitting around at the bar with the hot chick. They were sitting around with the Calder Cup. They were flirting with it, thinking that maybe, potentially one day you and I are going to go home. And the guy walked in with the Rolex and the Mercedes and sat down next to her, and she went home with him to play Twister. So the moral of the story is it was a good move, and to get over it. And, I mean, just from sheer throughput, from winning throughput last week, Cleveland won that trade. They went 36-2 and put up like 617 goals. So they won the trade, and it was a good move for him and his organization. He did the right thing, and he did what a good manager would do. So, hey, such is life.
Yeah, I mean, he explained exactly what happened and his situation, and not everybody obviously knows that until they're explained what was in the works and why. And I mean, it sounded like those were smart moves for his organization overall, and that he's looking to the future and also just trying to help out with his AHL team, that he can do what he can to help them out, and it still helps him at the same time, with being able to ECU those guys. I think it was a smart move as an owner. That's what you got to do. And sometimes, obviously, people aren't going to think those things are fair, but like you said, whatever. They were already a stacked team, but this has helped them, sure. I don't personally see a big deal with it. I think it was just a really smart move overall, especially after learning the whys.
So is there anything about the moves that they did last week? Is there anything about it that you would do differently if you were the GM? Vibes, I'll give you the first crack at this.
Yeah, try and get more. That's what
But other than that, you're
No, I mean, I think that they did the right thing for the organization. They gave up, my favorite player in the entire move is probably Herms.
mhm.
So they gave up a lot, but he felt like it was something that was going to help out his AHL team this season. Excuse me. And he also kept in mind the future of the NHL because he said that the Columbus Blue Jackets were in a holding pattern, maybe holding their own junk pattern. That's about it because they weren't going anywhere. So he figured, let me help out my AHL team, and I'll move forward next season. He picked up the draft pick, and I think he did the right thing. As far as doing anything else, I don't know. I don't know what else he could have done. Maybe not give up Herms. That's about it. I don't know what else he could have done. He did a good job.
Yeah. No, it was good, and you got to do what you got to do for your team. So, and I mean, I'm sure he had his conversations with his AHL GM and saw what his needs were, if he was okay with being able to make a move like that, if he could afford that. So, I mean, it's always helpful when the owner and the GM can actually get along that way and have something work out for both of them. That can be a rare occurrence as well. So it's good when you see that happen where it can work for both sides, and the guys that you send out to other teams, they also get to go to another good team potentially. Although I don't remember which team it was that Derms went to, but
He went to the Islanders.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's the other thing too. He did a really good thing for his organization without trade raping the other side. You know what I mean? So, and that's rare. He made a good hockey move. You know what I mean? And that's all I'm going to say because next thing I know, people will accuse me of being in a relationship with Pest. So I'm done.
Yeah. No, I think you made a great point right there. It's not like he made some desperate moves or he made some moves where he really took advantage of other teams. The teams that were involved in these other moves, I don't necessarily hear them complaining about it because they had no problem. Everyone knew leading up to the trade deadline that Columbus had these players, that they're really on the bubble, and what are the monsters going to do? How are they going to be involved in this? And it's not like it's not like it shocked any of us. We saw this coming, so I don't know why people are so crazed about it. If you pay attention to how this league works, and you know how it works, and you saw what was happening, you knew that there was a good chance Cleveland were going to get these players coming back down to it.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, there's the other thing, and Mikey is kind of mentioning it to me, but we talked about this a couple of days ago. Again, other players are coming down. The Senators wound up having a couple of players, I believe, come down to them. Defense Straight, I think, was a drop down yesterday, coming from the NHL Senators down to Binghamton. There are a couple of other names here as well, but if you look at the send up and send downs, you'll see a bunch of them happen in the last couple of days. So there are teams doing this. It's not just Columbus and Cleveland. There are a lot of teams doing this, and you're not hearing a lot about this in the shout box because it wasn't a trade that was made, and it wasn't an announcement that we made on a show last week. So, folks, if you think it's just Cleveland and Columbus, go look at the moves up and down. You just go to your news and your moves, and select on call up and down, and you're going to see a list of them that happened between the NHL and the AHL in the last couple of days. And again, back to you guys as GMs. This is all part of the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I don't know. I attribute it to the whole millennial thing. You know what I mean? Everyone needs their safe space and their fucking safety pins, and they get upset about once something doesn't go their way.
Well,
so,
yeah. I mean, look, you and I are of the older set.
Yeah.
And we do sound like a bunch of complaining grandpas telling everyone to get off our lawn. But honestly, that's exactly what it is. You hit the nail on the head. We have a bunch of whiners who are used to winning and getting trophies for anything, and when things don't go their way, they don't know how to do anything but complain.
Yep.
And to me, this is exactly what it's about.
Yep.
Yeah,
I don't have much to say other than get over it.
I blame the participation awards they give out.
Oh, that sickens me beyond belief. Um, and so let's. I think we've exhausted this one enough, and with the time remaining in the show, there's one of the things that we talked about last week, and we wanted to bring it up again. And Vibes, you mentioned this: the teams that are right at the fifth place in their division. Are they going to be able to make that push to get into the playoffs, or are they done at this point? So
Yeah, there were a few teams that we said were clinging on to the life raft, right? And I don't know. I think the Titanic might have gone down for some of these people. So with all due respect to Albany, but I'm going to say that with 15 points out and only 2 weeks left in the season, Albany's probably out, right?
It's probably safe to say, unfortunately.
yeah, it is unfortunate because I do like this Albany team, and it's been I really thought that if they went on a run this week, they would have a chance and would be interesting to see how they finished up. Right now, they sit they sit in that last they sit one below that last spot behind Utica, and unfortunately they have 15 points back of the Comets, and so it's going to be incredibly tough for them to make that up in 2 weeks. And so
Yeah.
I kind of feel like at that point, I believe, and you guys may be absolutely right about this. In the Eastern, we may have the teams in the North that we should have.
Yep.
That's what I'm thinking at this point. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a pretty big, tall order for them to catch up.
Now on the other
Yeah.
side, for the Atlantic Vibes, we've got Bridgeport at 63, Providence at 64. Springfield is 9-10 points back of them. Are they still in this?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're still in it. I feel like what would we say that they were on life support last week, and I think the same holds true. I think they're still kind of on life support. They're what, 9 points back?
Yeah, 9 points back at Bridgeport for that last spot. And again, Bridgeport made some moves. They're a better team than 30-30-3. It is interesting to see where they are with their record, but I feel like they could be they could be as high as number 2 in the Eastern Atlantic. It just hasn't clicked for them in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be an interesting next couple of weeks for those guys, though, altogether. I mean, with Bridgeport at 1 point behind the Bruins there, and you've got, Springfield, like we were saying, 9 points out. But, I mean, both those teams, if the Bruins and the Sound Tigers have a rough week, and the Springfield can somehow have like a really great week, then obviously they're back in the conversation. But they got to pray that the Bruins and the Sound Tigers actually do pretty bad, both of them. And it can happen. So that could be really interesting to see how that pans out. It's not that far off, those guys.
3, 4, and 5 are they're still in it. You know what I mean? They're still trying to bang the same chick. So they're still they're still in the running. They're still in the room.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to put it. Let's look at the the Western Central.
I'm obviously a misogynist because I attribute everything to misogynistic sort of views. So anyway.
Yeah, well, I think people have forgiven you for all of that by now.
Yeah.
Western Central and Western Pacific right now. We've got the Checkers, your favorite team, actually, no, I was going to talk about the Wolves. We have the Wolves, who is Vibe's favorite team, who are hanging on to third place right now. Charlotte, 5 points back. Manitoba at number 5, 7 points back. And then I think after that we can probably, 11 points back of Charlotte is Rockford. I kind of think Rockford may be out of it at this point. They're playing better, though. They've gone 6-3-1 the past 10, so I don't know if we can totally count them out.
Yeah, see, that's what that's my thought process exactly. I feel like, yes, we can call Rockford. I think Rockford is out. But that being said, if there was a team who is dead that could potentially come back to life, it's probably Rockford. But,
yeah, they have a chance.
Yeah, I would say they're done, but maybe, just maybe, some way, somehow,
Yeah. Well, ultimately, yeah. I mean, they do. What is it? 11 points behind for fourth place. It's doable, but really, then Charlotte's they're pretty much on fire. I mean, they're doing really well. Chicago, they've been kind of up and down, but it's looking less and less likely that they'll catch up. Those two teams would really have to fall down, and of course, I'm hoping for that a bit. But it's just such a tight race there, and it's also very discouraging to see a team like ours with 73 points and be in our position, and other divisions we'd be near the top, like Eastern Atlantic there. So
here come the violins.
yeah, exactly. So no, but ultimately it makes it fun and exciting, and it's been it's must-win games for us and everybody in that division, especially third, fourth, and fifth spots. And I think it just makes for good, fun hockey each time we go up against those teams and every other team that we need to beat to make that spot.
Rockford winning 5 games this past week against Charlotte, Chicago, Milwaukee, San Diego, and San Jose. A couple of good wins there. Losing to Cleveland 8-3. That's certainly not going to help you. Lost to Manitoba, of course, on Monday, and then losing to the Wild 8-3. Losing to Cleveland and Iowa in big scores tells you that they're not quite where they are. Again, they could be looking to try and get more chemistry going with whatever moves they made, but they've got a long way to go to get there, and they are 50-50. When you got Charlotte and Manitoba ahead of you, I don't see Rockford overtaking both of those teams, and I'd have to count them out at this point. But it is like almost a 50-50 at this point whether or not they can make it. But I would say they're not going to.
Yeah, I would say most likely not. But stranger things have happened. We did elect Donald Trump as our president down here in the States, so anything could happen.
That's a very good point. We'll move on to the Western Pacific with Stockton leading now by 12 points over Bakersfield and Texas. Boy, I tell you, that top 3 in that league is just they're all playing well. And Texas coming off of a nice win against Cleveland. They're on a 4-game winning streak, 8-0-2 in their last 10. I like this Texas Stars team. And Bakersfield, like we said, they've got good talent up and down. And Stockton, they're going to be fun to watch in the playoffs. Now we've got San Diego, Tucson at 66 points each for that 4th playoff spot. And then after that, San Antonio still 6 points behind. I think that's reachable. After that, again, I think we had already counted out San Jose and Ontario, so I'm not even going to consider them. But San Antonio still in this. Not a great last 10 games, but they have a chance to make a move in the next 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this division is much like the Atlantic Division, where 4, 5, and 6 actually are kind of, they're kind of sleeping in the same bed. These teams, they're right on top of one another, so it could go anyway over there.
Yeah, that's an interesting division. That's so close. I mean, you certainly can't count them out for the Rampage, and we'll just have to see, how how San Diego does as well, and if they can somehow, I mean, they're only 10 points behind for third, but I don't know the way that those guys are playing over at the Stars there, and I don't really see them struggling to the point where they're going to let up, a team behind them catch up like that. The Heat, the Condors, the Stars, they're all really good teams, and I think they're basically just going to be fighting for, fourth there. So the Gulls, they got something to worry about with these other teams behind them.
This could be the most interesting division coming down the stretch. Coming down the final 2 weeks, this could be the most interesting division.
Yeah, with that many teams.
It's hard to say. I mean, when you got the Western and Central, which is pretty interesting, as well as the Atlantic, but this could be the most interesting division. You got 3 teams lumped together who are separated by almost nothing, and then you have 2 and 3, which are also separated by not a lot. Stockton kind of pushing ahead a little bit at the top, but even them, the first 6 teams that are in this division are it's close, and it's anyone's game right now.
Yeah.
San Antonio is going to have an interesting week. They have to play well the next 2 weeks. Week 8, they start out with Iowa tonight and WBS, which will also be a tough game. Monday, they got Lehigh Valley and Springfield, but the Thunderbirds are, struggling to try and make their own playoffs, so that'll be a nice matchup. Then they've got Tuesday, they got Cleveland and Hershey. Wednesday, they've got Providence, who've been playing incredibly well. Then they may catch a bit of a break with Hartford, the late game on Wednesday, but then Thursday, Bridgeport. So the Rampage have a tough schedule this week, and they better come out at least over 500 if they want to even stay in this one. This could be a make-or-break week for the Rampage.
Yeah, that's a rough week. That's a tough one for them.
Yep.
That's a tall order to get all those wins that they need. So, I mean, if they can actually pull that off, that's going to say a lot for them and do a lot.
Just talk about San Diego and Tucson. Is this one too close to call as to who we think is going to make out of this one? I like both teams. I like what Intro 9999 has done with that team in San Diego. He was with Rockford, then became an AGM, then got traded, then took over San Diego. So he's been around a bit this season, and he's trying to do his best to put together a good, solid team there. He's got them playing pretty well. Not a great week this past week, but they are right there in that 4th place position with Tucson. And of course, I like the folks in Tucson. They're they're a good bunch of players, and their management over there is are guys who I thought did a lot of good work before the season started. With Double Bra and Traz over there, Traz the GM. So I like the management of both these teams. I like what they've done, and they're staying alive in the Western Pacific. Do we have a preference on who we think is going to make it of those 2 teams?
Absolutely not.
It's a hard one. I mean, if I were to just make a little bit of a guess, but going more over kind of the the stats of these players that they have on their team and their goaltending and whatnot, I mean, maybe I'd give a little bit more favor to the Gulls, but even that being said, it's so close. It's so close that it's hard to even give it to them.
Yeah, see, I don't know, because, I mean, maybe accumulated stat-wise, but, I look at the Tucson roster, and they got a lot of talent on that roster.
Oh, they got lots of great players.
They got a lot of talent on that roster. So, maybe you say the other way. Maybe they haven't quite gotten going yet. That could be it as well. But
this will be the time to find out.
Yeah, it's much too close to call. Absolutely not. Do I have any idea who's going to make it out of these 2? No way.
It's going to be, like you said, I think this could be one of the most interesting divisions that we see down at the end, and I think it'll be fun to look at them more as we get along. The next 2 weekends, we're certainly going to be looking at the playoff race, pretty much strictly at the playoff race for each division. We're going to talk in depth about some of the games, some of the key games that are going on in these tight races. And again, after the week is over next week, we're going to talk about who is in, who is out, and then by the time we get down to the final week, we'll know what's going on. So a lot going on for the next 2 weeks. This is make or break for everybody. What do you, as a GM, Well, first I'll ask Dead Soul. You're in that position. What do you tell your guys about the final 2 weeks of the season?
Well, basically, we gotta bring it every game. You know, we gotta practice more. We've been trying to do that as much as possible. We just gotta have a positive mindset going forward. Just know that we can, make the playoffs and we can win against these teams. We can hold our own against the best and we can beat them as well. But we've had a couple losses against those teams too, so it can be a little discouraging. But we just try to make sure that everybody just reminds themselves that this is anything can happen, and sometimes it won't go our way. But as long as we come out there, play our best, put in the effort to practice together when we can, then we'll have a better chance. But I mean, if that's not going to happen, it's just not going to work out for you in the end.
What kind of threatening Newt Rockney type speech would you have, Vibes?
I'd tell them, the season doesn't start till week 3, and we're in week 7, so let's get it going, huh?
Yeah, I think there's not much else you can say, is there? Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's go time. It's now. Now is the time. I mean, when the playoffs do hit, it is a new season, and that's when it's really go time. But it's also go time now, because if you guys want any life, if you guys want any playoff life, now's the time to make your stand and make sure that you get in. Because if you don't get in, well then, you're not even at the dance. I keep talking about that girl sitting at the bar. You're not even getting in the bar. So...
Wow. It sounds like a man who's gone through a lot of these situations.
Oh, yeah.
I mean LG, not in real life.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about... getting turned down by women at bars.
Well, yeah, we could do a whole show of that. Probably even longer than the trade deadline show was. So yeah, that's about it this week. We're going to be on again next Sunday as usual. Hopefully, we'll have more of the crowd to talk about what's going on for the playoffs. But any parting shots here, guys, before we leave?
It just seems like a lot of people were very unhappy with the show this week. I don't know, blow me. How about that?
Well, there's one thing I like to keep in mind, that the community is important, and I really value their opinions.
Of course.
But in the end, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do, and if you don't like it, don't listen. Plain and simple.
I was just kidding, guys. Don't blow me. Just a joke.
Listen, guys. Best of luck for next week, and we'll talk more as we get closer. We don't know what the Thursday night game is going to be just yet, but we got a lot of good ones coming up. We had a lot of great matchups last week, and we'll let you know as soon as we get that figured out. Thanks again to Vibes and Dead Soul, gentlemen. Good talking to you as usual.
I'm excited about the next couple weeks. We got the playoffs coming. I'm excited.
This is a lot of fun. Yeah, this getting down to it is always a blast. Again, thanks, Dead Soul. Appreciate the time. Folks, that's it for Week 7 recap. Week 8 starting up in a few hours, 6 hours or so. So, good luck to you this week. And we will talk to you again next week on AHL PSN This Week.